Coming up this week on Motor Week, a touch of Teutonic glamour with the Mercedes Coupe, something fresh, French and alternative in the Citroen C5, and something, well, French and just cheap really, the Citroen Ax, our used car for this week.
Mercedes customers are an incredibly loyal bunch. Once they've bought that three-pointed star, they tend to stick with it. I should know, I've driven Mercs for the last 7 years and my current Steed has just covered 160,000 miles. Why do we like them? Well, build quality, strength and durability. My old E-Class will go on for another 100,000, I'm sure. It used to be residual value, but that's been pretty savagely knocked over the last few years. And today you can't really say hand on heart that the second-hand values are all that much better than the competition. The trouble with the traditional Mercedes buyer is that they're a dying breed. The customer base is too old, and Mercedes customers tend to hang on to their cars far too long for a manufacturer's comfort, especially a manufacturer who's in the sort of financial trouble that Mercedes is in now they've bought Chrysler. Hence the need for this, the new C-Class Sports Coupe, a smaller, lighter, cheaper Mercedes that makes a real fashion statement. A car designed and marketed to pull back some of those BMW 3 Series sales and some of those younger buyers who care more about image and performance than they do about reliability and long life. Generous glass sunroof that gives the illusion of almost a convertible. The roof slides back over the top of the rear roof. Not a new idea. I remember my RX-7 Mazda doing that many years ago. Nevertheless, looks good and there's not too much turbulence at speed, although a little bit more drumming with the roof wide open than you might prefer at speed on the Autobahn. Inside, well, as you'd expect for a Mercedes, quality looking materials. The plastic trim looks nice. The aluminium trim round the centre of the console here is good. But as for the rest of it, well, it's unrelieved gloom of too much black carpet and dark grey in the seats, although the seats themselves are very supportive and very comfortable. In the back here, well, not a huge amount of legroom as you'd expect for a compact coupe, but nevertheless full-size seats and a decent amount of legroom if small adults or children are going a long distance. It's a relatively small car by Mercedes standards, so it's quite easy to place on these narrow village roads. Of course, Mercedes have stuck to rear-wheel drive as well, so it's also quite fun to drive around these corners, just like a BMW. This car's fitted with the Mercedes Sequatronic gearbox. It's one of these new trendy paddle shift operations, no clutch, and an electronic control for the gear shift itself. Personally, I'm not convinced. I prefer either a proper automatic or, for screaming up and down the south of France coals, a clutch lever and a gear shift. The coupe we drove, a 230 compressor, could break the 8-second barrier in the 0 to 60 dash and go on to a maximum of around 150 miles an hour. There's also a 1.8 litre petrol, a 2 litre supercharged and, unusually for a sports car, a 2.3 diesel engine, which is only marginally slower than the supercharged petrol car and much more economical. When Mercedes launched the CLK Coupe, it was an instant success and they discovered they got a classic on their hands. They're obviously hoping that the same sort of magic is going to rub off on this coupe, the new C-Class Coupe. If it works or not depends on how the car is perceived. After all, they're after an awful lot of conquest sales. They say 65% of people who buy the 4,500 of these on sale in the UK will be newcomers to Mercedes. How will it be seen in the market though? As a cheap Mercedes coupe or a very expensive Citroen Zara competitor?
Now this week I'm looking at value for money motoring. Firstly, a car that is cheap to buy, and secondly, one that offers brilliant, absolutely brilliant fuel economy, and it's this, the Citroen Ax. This is a 4-year-old example and was one of the last of the AXs to be built before the Saxo came along, its replacement in 1996. Drive through the streets of any major city in France and they'll be teeming with Citroen AXs, most of which will certainly have seen plenty of life. The French don't look after their cars like we tend to do, and these cars are definitely built to last. Now Citroen launched the AX way back in 1987 and they sold millions and millions across Europe. It had one facelift in 1991 and continued life until 96. If you like basic no-frills motoring, then the AX could be just the car for you. This AX has got very little on it, to be honest, not even central locking. What it has got is an economical 1.5 diesel engine, only 58 brake horsepower, but pay £28 to fill the tank and it'll go for 500 miles. Now even I can't argue with that. With regular changes for oil, coolant and the cam belt, this block will go on and on and on. Now the AX is a very light car and you could say it's, well, to be honest, somewhat tinny, so it does tend to dent very easily on the bodywork. So check all around for signs of any blemishes and do check hard because they can be difficult to spot. Okay, you can repair them, but it just adds extra cost. And in true French style, the AX also gets some rather interesting things in the doors. Pockets here, which will hold properly a bottle of wine. Just add a string of onions and a beret for true Gallic style. The driving ability for the Citroen Ax, whilst hardly great, is perfectly acceptable. It's fine on motorways despite its lack of power, but it does start to get a touch out of shape on twisty sections of roads. Insurance shouldn't be a problem either. This 1.5 diesel is a Group 6 and the base 1 litre a Group 3. Our price guide for an AX looks like this. A 1.1 AX 3-door on a K-plate with 50,000 miles, £1,200. A 1995 NREG AX Elation 1 litre with 60,000 miles, £1,400. The mildly sporty AX GT on a J-plate with 80,000 miles for £1,000. Diesel AXs hold their value well. Expect to pay nearly £3,000 for a later model 1.5 diesel or around £2,500 for this AX. Now this AX belongs to one of our producers, Rob, and he, in 4 years of ownership, has had no problems with it. It's always started first time, and 500 miles on a tank full of diesel can't be argued with. Its shape, well, it's beginning to look a bit dated now, certainly up against its replacement, the Saxo, but that costs a lot more. So this week's used car tip is the Citroen Ax diesel.
It's amazing, isn't it, how things come back round in fashion again. No sooner have you mothballed your favourite tank top than you find it's very much de rigueur down at your local boozer. There is even a rumour that the same goes for holidays and that canal boat trips will be very much the thing to be seen doing next year, though I can't see it myself. The same rules apply to cars though, and the hot hatch, which disappeared in the late 80s, killed off by cruel insurance, is enjoying quite a strong resurgence. Now, we have spoken about this before on the programme, and we've seen some of the latest newcomers, such as the Saxo VTS. But what about the old stages, the real old hot hatches we remember from our youth? Well, Ford's XR3i may be long dead and buried, but Vauxhall would say they've never been away with hot versions of their Astra. And this, the SXi, is the latest. In the Astra's various incarnations, it's gone from very boxy through being swoopy, then to the decidedly middle-of-the-road Mark III, ending up now in a combination of straight and curved lines in what is probably the most resolved and grown-up design yet. Whilst the exterior, if admittedly rather conservative, is finished and complete, the interior, well, frankly, it's a bit of a disappointment. Dull and rather boring. Best ignored. Now, the previous version of the Astra may have been as sophisticated as an Australian football team's annual Christmas party, but the new one is a whole new kettle of fish. As you'd expect, that's mainly because the handling has been tweaked by Lotus, which explains why it handles, well, really, so well. Given that it's up against the likes of the Ford Focus, which in particular has a reputation for handling very nicely, thank you, it's going to have to perform, and it does deliver. It's very, very pliable, very comfortable to drive. It doesn't feel threatening or challenging, but as soon as you start to push it, you recognise it's actually got what it takes. Start to push it hard through any kind of corner and you just know it's going to deliver. It's very communicative, there's plenty of feel through the steering, and as soon as you feel it start to break away and strain the grip, if you lift off, you'll get that pre-programmed lift-off understeer, which basically means you can feel the back end start to come round in a very controlled manner and the car turns in eagerly into the corner. As soon as you apply the power again, it neutralises and balances itself. The result of that is it's very easy to drive fast on the limit and feel it just drifting nice and controllably. In normal daily life though, what you get is a comfortable, shoppable car. Whilst the steering and handling are perfectly acceptable for the class, the brakes are a bit of a letdown. There's very little feel at the pedal and it's very easy to lock a wheel. This SXI has the 1.8 litre engine, which is perfectly acceptable. It makes a great noise when you start to push it. Most of the power is in the middle of the range. It's not about top end thrashing around at high engine speeds. Cost about £13,695 for this car, or for £13,695 you can have the 1.6 litre version. Same price, so I guess you're going to go for the 1.8. If you like your hatchbacks prepared the way I favour my curries, warm but not too hot, then you're spoilt for choice at the moment because that's the way the market seems to be going. Maybe it's a result of us all getting older and more sensible. So if you've got the Tindaloo that is perhaps the Saxo VTS or the hot new Clio Sport, maybe at the other end of the scale there's the rather overweight Golf GTI. That would be a Corma. This then lies somewhere in the middle, a sort of Vauxhall Rogan Josh. And as that, it makes a lot of sense. Coming up after the break, Glenda gets behind the wheel of Citroen's new technology-laden C5.
Now, if you've been reading the motoring press recently, you'll be aware that one of the many cars to be launched this year is the new Citroen C5. It's replacing the old Citroen Xantia and it's going to take on the likes of Mondeo, Passat and Laguna head-on in the fleet market. But you know, it isn't inconceivable that someone might want to buy this car who isn't a sales rep, someone who doesn't want to hang the suit jacket in the back and be worried about company car tax. So instead of comparing it to all of the other fleet market contenders, why don't we take it on its own merits and see what we think of it that way? Starting with the body design, it's nice to see that Citroen seem to be getting back to their roots with the look of the C5. The old Citroens like the DS were instantly recognisable, and I think they've managed to capture some of that old flair and style with this new shape. The car isn't small either by family saloon standards. It's not quite the longest, but it's definitely the tallest on the market and without seeming bulky. And at the back, as well as the cavernous boot, they prove that you don't have to copy Lexus for your light clusters. once you get inside, there's nothing too offensive. It's all very well laid out. But Citroen went on for hours about how this curve was the driver curve, and this curve was the passenger curve, and this curve is the shared console. All very French, really. However, the dashboard does house Citroen's usual array of electronic gadgetry. This includes air conditioning, CD player, and further up here in this console, you've got optional satellite navigation and also a handy little parking monitor which will beep at you if you get too near to a wall behind. Another good safety device is there's a monitor on here which lets you know if your tyre pressure's getting too low. Citroen have always been renowned for superb suspension, and in the new C5, the Hydractive 3 is reputed to be the best suspension system yet. They've done away with the miles of expensive piping that were underneath the Xantia and replaced it with electronics. The electronic system is very clever because it's constantly monitoring and changing the suspension setting depending on the roads. So if you're on a long, flat, straight road, you're going to get that legendary, smooth Citroen ride. And as soon as the roads get bendy, the suspension tightens up and you get a much more sporty feel. Now this is a vast improvement on the Xantia because although you got a great ride on the straight, once you got into the corners, it was just far too soft. And you'd often come out feeling car sick. Now it's not only the suspension that's changed in the new Citroen C5, we've also got a new gearbox and a wide range of new engines, starting from a 1.8 and going right up to a 3-litre V6. This is going to offer a wide range of power and also fuel economy to suit all needs. The price range starts at about 14.5 grand and goes up to 23. Now don't get me wrong, you're not going to get the ride of Ferrari on the bends and a Mercedes on the straights when you're driving this car, but it is a good all-rounder. And as for electronics, well, there are a few things that I haven't even told you about yet. The windscreen wipers work automatically when it starts to rain. The headlights come on automatically when it gets dark. You can shut the windows and the sunroof automatically from the key fob. This is definitely not a Xantia with curves. It's a completely new car from the floor pan up. And with loads of brand new models in the pipeline, you better watch this space. Yes, I said it all without even mentioning the word fleet.
The Honda Civic has the kind of sales figures that would send most manufacturers delirious with joy. 13.5 million of the last 6 models have been sold around the world. And what's more, the people that buy them absolutely love them. They come back time and time again. So what's the problem? Well, it's just a bit boring, isn't it? No, not anymore. What strikes you straight away is how radically different this car has become. In the past, it really did appeal to the traditional, older buyer. But now Honda are all out to get a much younger market into this car, and it shows in the design. Take the badge away and you'd never know it was a Honda. Well, Honda haven't been quite as brave in here. It's a bit dark and there is far too much black plastic. Why do manufacturers keep on using it? Because it just looks awful. What they have done though is rearrange things. It's very streamlined and everything does feel very good quality. There are a couple of unusual touches as well, like this strangely positioned gear stick, familiar to people that drive an MPV or a van, but very unusual in a hatchback. Apparently, as well as freeing up some floor space down there, its closeness to the steering wheel means that it's easier to change gear. Oh well, let's give it a try. When the Civic goes on sale in January, this 5-door hatch will be the first model available, followed by the Coupe in the spring and the 3-door hatch in the autumn. And the good news for motorists who want to buy British is that they'll both be built at Honda's plant in Swindon. When the first models of the Civic are available, there'll be a choice of two engines, an 89 brake horsepower 1.4 and this 108 brake horsepower 1.6 unit. Now, Honda's engineers have tinkered with both of the engines and you really can feel the difference out on the road, particularly in the mid-range. It really does feel quite punchy now. On paper, it's also quicker and more economic than both the 1.6 Focus and the Golf. And something to look forward to will be the sporty 210 brake horsepower 2-litre version that will arrive next autumn and will carry the badge Type R. After a spell behind the wheel in the Civic, you notice a couple of things. The first is just how much room there is in here. It's very light and airy, and there's even plenty of room for the passengers in the back. The second is the quality of it. It does feel like a really well-built car. It gives you confidence that it's going to be around to withstand the rigours of family motoring, which is a very important thing. So, what about price? After all, this is a very tightly fought market. The cars in this sector make up for around a third of all new cars sold in Britain. And at the end of the day, it often comes down to price. Well, the new Civic will start at £11,995 on the road, with the top of the range costing just under £14,000. With prices like that, I'd say cars like the Ford Focus could find themselves with a real battle on their hands. I've got to say, I think this 7th generation Civic will win itself lots of new friends. But the question is, would I buy one? I mean, I'm just the kind of person that Honda are trying to attract. And I've got to say, I think I would. It's a good value car, it's good quality, and what's more, I even like the way it looks. Oh no, a Honda Civic. I'm getting old.
Coming up next week, a new compact for Ginny Buckley. A BMW compact, that is.